It is the 15th day of our great journey along the Nile. Finally, with Luxor sandstone and limestone behind us, we reach Egypt's far south, the kingdom of granite, Aswan, home to a people who wear their name with pride, the Nubians. Nubia's history is complicated and tragic. This was the immensely rich land of Kush, gold mines and the trade routes that fed Egypt with the luxury materials used to artistic masterpieces and royal palaces. That is why already around the 3rd to 4th millennia BCE, Egyptian pharaohs moved in and subjugated Nubia, not only to extract gold and precious stone, but to turn it into a source of slaves, almost draining the land dry. Nubia was never officially part of Egypt, and yet Egypt's greatness stood to a large extent of Nubian wealth. Even the name Nubia is linked to a word Nub, gold, a golden land. Proud and warlike, the Nubians never simply surrendered. They rose against conquest again and again, but later they were almost wiped off the map in a different way by flooding most of Nubia under the Nile after the construction of the Great Aswan Dam. Nubian was promised new fertile land in exchange for what was drowned. Of course, those promises were never kept. Today, what remains of these people lives in poverty and overcrowding of tiny scraps of allotted territory. And still they show to the world that despite misery and betrayed hope, they remain open, honest and welcoming. They proudly show you their astonishingly painted homes and even Nile crocodiles kept as pets. Their new permanent home became Aswan, the southernmost major city of Egypt, known in antiquity as Tepid. And the heart of Tepid was an island, Elephantine, a great sacred land in the main channel of the Nile. Traditionally, ancient Egyptians divide humanity into 4 races. They saw themselves as red. They called the inhabitants of Asia Minor, Phoenicians and Syrians, white, Libyans yellow, and Nubians black. Nubians, or as Egyptians call them, the Kushites, the people of Kush, were despised, and in official text were called Kush the Despicable. And yet this very despicable Kush, led by King Pianhi, seized Egypt in the 8th century BCE when the country was reeling after the fall of the New Kingdom. A Nubian dynasty of Egyptian pharaoh was born and ruled for about 100 years. And no, you can't honestly call it bad rule. On the contrary, at the time when faith and tradition in Egypt itself were fading, the Kushites, culturally, religiously, intellectually close to Egypt, managed to preserve and support Egyptian traditions. They worshipped the same gods, cared of ancient monuments, and King Taharqa even launched grand construction project in Luxor. It looks in many ways as if Egypt benefited from Nubian kings. But their dynasty was short. By the 7th century BCE, Assyrian invasion swept the Nubians off Egypt's throne. New disasters came to Nubia in 1906, when the British built the first Aswan Dam. Later, the Soviet Union built the great Sad El Ali, the Aswan High Dam, creating a colossal reservoir some 500 kilometers long and destroying much of Nubia for good. With the second dam, many ancient temples ended up underwater. More than 40 countries donated money to save the most important monuments, even the poorest like Togo or Nigeria. The only one that donated nothing was Soviet Union, the very country that was building the dam. Khrushchev visited Egypt and showed no interest in ancient monuments at all. He didn't understand or didn't care about Egyptian culture and its value. He prized concrete and cheap electricity instead. The Soviet light tube couldn't have cared less. Not a single Soviet specialist even physically took part in rescuing historical relics. And it got worse. In the 20th century, environmental inspections were practically non-existent, and the calculations were made without regard for local realities. The dam project was tested on the Dnieper, so the sheer volume of Nile silt wasn't considered at all. As a result, a colossal mass of silt accumulated behind the dam, putting enormous pressure on the structure, and the mechanisms regularly break down. Because the silt stopped reaching Egypt, soils began to salinize, and for the first time in its history, the country was forced to rely on chemical fertilizers. Fish catches across the entire Mediterranean coasts, all the way to Turkey, fell 15-fold. In other words, with all the problems it created, Egypt would have been better off buying electricity and keeping its resources and profits intact. Instead, hundreds of thousands lost their homes, were resettled in the north, and, as we already said, never received what they were promised. Many now survive in horrific conditions. Many historic temples and fortresses ended up underwater. Buildings once created to bring offerings to the gods became offerings themselves, sacrificed to the god of technological progress. That all Nubia can now be seen only in Nubian Museum in Aswan, where the story of this land is gathered from the 4th millennium BCE to the present day. It is another Egypt, lost, and it will never return. And also in a small Nubian village where the remnants of this proud people still live, a people that even the greatest hardships failed to break. To the west of Elephantine lies the island of gardens, Gezeret an-Nabatat, also called Kitchener's Island. Awarded this island for military service in Sudan, Consul General Kitchener turned it into the focus of his passion – exotic plants. He brought seedlings and seeds from all over the world, even from India and Malaysia. Today the botanical garden covers the entire island, and we spend the evening there watching colorful birds flicker between the trees. You can reach the island by motorboat or by felucca from the western bank of Elephantine. Just agree the price with the boatman. Elephantine got its name from massive black rocks at its southern edge, resembling a herd of elephants bathing in the river. Among luxuriant palm grows stand two Nubian villages, Siu and Koti. Their houses are painted sky blue, pink or yellow and often decorated with Hajj scenes. Near the center there is a building with a sign Nubian House. The owner sells tea and handicrafts and also organizes musical performances. At the southern edge of the island, the ruins of Ptolemaic period city lie scattered. The small Aswan Museum is housed in the former estate of Sir William Wilcox, who designed the first Aswan Dam. Among its key exhibits are the granite statue of Thutmose III and jewelry found in the Temple of Satet. With your entry ticket, you can also visit the ancient Nilometers, the earliest water gauges used to track the Nile's rise. They allowed priests to calculate the height of the flood, the future harvest, and therefore the taxes. There are two Nilometers on Elephantine. Both were built at the end of the pharaonic era, yet they rest on the far older tradition that exists for millennia. 90 rock-cut steps lead down to a rectangular shaft, whose walls bear Arabic, Roman, and faint ancient Egyptian numerical markings, proof that the Nilometer remained in use from antiquity right up to the end of the 19th century. We could talk about Nubia forever, but better than any words, it's seeing it with your own eyes. No photo or video will ever fully capture its breathtaking beauty. The deep dark blue crystal clear water and the granite cliffs rising above it. The best way to experience it is the traditional way unchanged for thousands of years, taking a felucca upstream. Gliding along the bank, you can calmly take in astonishing views: the tombs of ancient nomarchs, provincial governors, parks and temples. Ahead is the final, closing stage of our journey. And we want to believe that after this story, and after the road we'll walk together, you will see Egypt differently, as a country of immense, millennia-old culture, not merely a comfortable resort on the Red Sea.